The heavy sound of a body slamming onto packed soil was followed by an uncomfortable silence across the yard. Moments earlier, the weekend cookout was filled with laughter, sizzling meat, and the clinking of cold soda bottles. Now, everyone stared at the lawn in complete shock as I pinned my young cousin to the earth with absolute precision. My arm was wrapped firmly around his throat, cutting off his air supply before he could react. Beneath me, my cousin Mason thrashed around like a landed fish, while his arrogance vanished into thin air. His face turned bright purple as he tapped frantically on my arm, completely helpless. I looked up calmly at the gathering of astonished relatives who never expected this outcome. To my family, I was merely Jax, a quiet Pilates instructor who occasionally traveled for obscure international logistics work. They assumed I spent my days arranging shipping schedules or sitting inside boring corporate offices. In reality, while Mason was learning how to march at boot camp, I was conducting high-risk counterterrorism missions across dangerous foreign territories. 3 hours before the backyard incident, the atmosphere was saturated with hero worship for young Mason. He had just graduated from basic military training and could not stop bragging about his tough routines. My parents looked at him with glowing admiration, constantly praising his new uniform. Meanwhile, I sat quietly near the fence, sipping my drink and keeping my thoughts private. I was accompanied by Cole, a trusted teammate from my tactical unit whom I introduced as my casual date. We sat together on the edge of the party, watching my mother Valerie fawn over every detail of the story Mason told. My parents viewed Mason as a brave warrior, while seeing me as an aimless wanderer who lacked real direction in life. Eventually, Mason decided he needed an audience to showcase his fresh military hand-to-hand combat techniques. He stepped into the middle of the grass, executing clumsy defensive moves that amazed our uncritical relatives. Then, his arrogant gaze settled on me, deciding that the slender fitness instructor would make the perfect volunteer to show off his newly acquired skills. Mason grinned condescendingly and claimed that gym conditioning was meaningless in a real physical confrontation. He grabbed my forearm firmly, attempting to demonstrate a basic joint lock in front of the cheering crowd. He twisted my wrist with unnecessary force, smugly declaring that I was already defeated. He had no idea he was grabbing a seasoned tactical specialist. My pulse remained completely steady while decades of trained muscle memory reacted beneath my calm exterior. Every instinct urged me to disable his limb and strike his vulnerable throat, but I forced myself to hold back. He genuinely believed he was the most dangerous individual in the yard, unaware that I had spent years neutralizing threats twice his size. My parents always discussed my life choices, with a tone of quiet disappointment whenever relatives asked questions. My mother Valerie routinely minimized my career, telling neighbors that I simply worked for a basic humanitarian shipping company. She considered my quiet lifestyle dishonorable compared to traditional military service, never suspecting that my secrecy was designed to protect them all. While Mason recounted basic training stories with dramatic tension, my mind drifted back to recent operations. A few weeks prior, I was deployed in a high-risk hostile zone securing critical target assets. I was not handling paperwork in an office, but carrying heavy tactical gear, navigating dark corridors, and executing swift close-quarters combat under extreme pressure. In that dangerous hallway, an armed hostile suddenly appeared around a corner before my team could react cleanly. I closed the distance instantly, taking control of the enemy and applying a silent submission move to end the engagement. That was the hidden reality of my true profession, making the contrast with this peaceful suburban cookout feel almost surreal. Back at the barbecue, Mason continued lecturing his father about maintaining continuous tactical awareness in everyday life. Yet he stood with his back completely exposed to the open driveway, oblivious to a delivery driver approaching the property. Beside me, Cole noticed my intense focus and softly reminded me to relax since we were off duty. As the afternoon progressed, Mason grew even bolder, demanding a live sparring partner to validate his military pride. He stepped into my personal space, challenging me to step onto the grass for a quick demonstration. I politely declined, encouraging him to enjoy the food and avoid creating a scene, but he mistook my calm refusal for fear. Mason mocked my hesitation and stepped closer, attempting to force the issue in front of everyone. Cole stepped forward to warn the young recruit that he was making a serious mistake, but Mason carelessly brushed him aside. Then Mason crossed the ultimate line by forcefully shoving my shoulder and taking a wide, aggressive boxing stance right in front of me. That disrespectful physical shove signaled that the peaceful family gathering was over. I carefully set my glass down on the wooden railing, keeping my body completely relaxed and balanced. The laughing relatives gathered around in a loose circle, taking out their phones to capture what they believed would be a funny wrestling match between cousins. Mason launched a wide, clumsy right hook aimed directly at my collar, expecting me to cringe backward in terror. Instead of retreating, I stepped inside his movement, sweeping his front leg and redirecting his momentum toward the earth. He hit the grass with a heavy thud, and before he could gasp, I locked in a precise chokehold. I leaned near his ear, calmly instructing him to control his breathing and accept the loss before he lost consciousness. Panic flooded his face, and he rapidly tapped my forearm to submit. I released him immediately, standing up without a single hair out of place while the surrounding family watched in absolute silence, completely paralyzed by what they had just witnessed. My grandfather Hank, a quiet combat veteran, walked slowly into the center of the yard and studied the scene. He ignored the shocked murmurs of my parents and looked directly into my eyes with deep mutual understanding. He bluntly informed Mason that he had just been easily outmatched by a true professional, permanently altering how the family perceived me. Months later, while sitting inside a military transport aircraft preparing for another classified mission, my phone buzzed with a message. It was a photo from Mason working hard at the gym, acknowledging the effective technique I had used against him. Real strength does not require constant public display, because true power rests in quiet confidence.